Before the lights go out and the engines drown everything else, there is a silence inside Ducati that no telemetry can measure. It's the kind of silence that settles when winning is no longer enough, when questions begin to echo louder than lap times. Somewhere between carbon fiber and human doubt, a decision is being felt rather than announced. Casey Stoner knows this silence well. He has lived it, survived it, and now he names it without raising his voice. This is not the story of a rider being replaced, but of a factory choosing how it wants to feel when things go wrong. One man sharpens the bike by questioning it. The other protects it by absorbing the fall. Both are champions. Only one fits the moment. What happens when belief becomes more valuable than truth, when momentum outweighs loyalty, and when silence speaks louder than titles? Stay with this story, because what Ducati prefers today may redefine who leads tomorrow. The moment Ducati's management chose to criticize Pecco Bagnaia in public, the paddock inhaled sharply, mistaking strategy for betrayal. From Casey Stoner's vantage point, it was neither, but a recalibration visible only to those who have lived inside the red walls of Borgo Panigale. Bagnaia, he insists, is still a double world champion with a calm geometry of a rider who wins by reducing chaos. Yet Stoner knows how factories speak, and this was a memo written in headlines rather than emails. In Bagnaia's helmet, thought flickered, "I have delivered titles, so why does this feel like a test instead of trust?" Stoner defends that feeling, reminding us that pressure distorts even success when expectations grow faster than lap times. He says, Ducati isn't questioning Pecco's talent, they're redefining what leadership looks like when the margins vanish, and the emphasis lands heavily. The little-known detail is that Bagnaia's Desmacetici runs a subtly softer engine brake torque map mid-corner, a choice that stabilizes tire load but amplifies feedback when grip drops. That sensitivity explains his candor, because riders feel the truth first through carbon and rubber. Journalistically, the signal is clear. Ducati wants process over protest, solutions over sound bites. Intimately, Stoner recalls how silence once cost him time, and honesty once cost him allies. Bagnaia's precision is like a watchmaker aligning gears under glass, immaculate yet intolerant of dust. Ducati's message asks for a different craft, one that keeps ticking even when the bench vibrates. In 2025, efficiency under pressure is measured not only in sector times but in how a leader steadies the room. Stoner's defense is unwavering because he recognizes the difference between criticism and calibration. He frames the episode as a fork in the road rather than a verdict. The crowd hears doubt, but the factory hears direction. Bagnaia absorbs it all, wondering if composure can speak louder than complaint. The tension peaks as Stoner closes the circle between faith and function, insisting the bond is strained, not broken. And the night ends with a truth that lingers like heat in the asphalt. This was a signal to evolve, not an order to leave. Casey Stoner does not hear weakness when Pecco Bagnaia raises his voice. He hears the familiar crackle of a champion rubbing against expectation. In the quiet between sessions, Stoner remembers that frustration is often the byproduct of precision, not its opposite. Bagnaia's complaints, he argues, are not tantrums but telemetry spoken aloud, data translated into emotion. Inside Pecco's helmet, the thought returns lap after lap. If the limit has moved, why can I feel it slipping through my fingers? Stoner insists that every elite rider reaches that moment where silence feels dishonest. If you're not frustrated, you're not really fighting for the last tenth, Stoner says, and the sentence lands with the weight of experience. The Desmacetici's 2025 chassis uses a revised carbon fiber layup around the steering head, increasing rigidity while narrowing the feedback window, a detail few outside the garage truly grasp. That narrow window sharpens sensation and shortens patience. Journalistically, this matters because Ducati titles were not built on blind obedience but on riders who pushed back intelligently. Stoner defends Bagnaia by contextualizing his tone, reminding that development is rarely polite when margins shrink. Emotion enters because frustration is the sound of ambition colliding with physics. Bagnaia is not rejecting responsibility, he is wrestling with it in public. His relationship with the bike resembles a pianist arguing with a grand piano that resonates too loudly in an empty hall. The notes are right, but the echo unsettles him. Ducati hears noise, while Stoner hears engagement. In MotoGP 2025, the cost of pretending satisfaction can be higher than the cost of admitting doubt. Bagnaia's honesty exposes nerves, not cracks. Stoner's defense grows firmer as the paddock narrative hardens. He has seen champions muted into mediocrity by being told to smile instead of speak. The tension swells because frustration is dangerous only when ignored. And the story crests on a simple truth that refuses to fade. Bagnaia's anger is not a flaw. It is proof that he still cares enough to hurt. Casey Stoner approaches Ducati's growing gravitational pull toward Marc Márquez with the calm of someone who understands how factories think when trophies are at stake. He's careful to strip the debate of emotion first, Because this is not about disrespecting Francesco Bagnaia's record or erasing the championships already engraved in Ducati's walls. Stoner frames it as a matter of mentality, a word that in MotoGP carries more weight than raw speed. In Bagnaia's mind, a question hums quietly during long nights. How can winning still feel like I am being measured again? Stoner does not dismiss that doubt, but he contextualizes it within Ducati's present reality. This isn't about who deserves more. It's about who absorbs pressure better when things go wrong, Stoner explains, his voice steady and unapologetic. The little-known technical layer beneath this preference lies in Márquez's tolerance for unstable, rear-ride-height behavior under extreme load, something the 2025 Desmosedici still exhibits during late-race tire drop. Ducati values riders who normalize instability rather than amplify it. Journalistically, the factory's logic is brutally simple. Confidence is a currency, and Márquez spins it freely even after mistakes. Bagnaia, by contrast, interrogates the system aloud, not to undermine it, but to refine it. Intimately, that difference becomes decisive when adversity strikes. Márquez's mentality acts like a shock absorber made of muscle memory, compressing chaos before it reaches the garage. Bagnaia's is more like a precision scale, sensitive enough to detect every imbalance. Neither is wrong, but Ducati needs reassurance more than diagnosis in this phase. Stoner defends Bagnaia by reminding that merit has already been proven on track and on paper. Preference, however, lives in the present tense. The factory listens for the voice that steadies engineers when grip disappears and margins collapse. Bagnaia hears that silence and wonders if composure can be louder than conviction. The tension sharpens because loyalty in MotoGP is often situational, not sentimental. Stoner acknowledges the discomfort without softening the truth. Ducati is choosing psychological reinforcement over historical validation. The climax lands not with blame, but clarity. In the end, preference does not rewrite the past, but it redraws the future with a colder pen. Casey Stoner explains the contrast with the calm authority of someone who has lived both extremes of control and chaos. Francesco Bagnaia, he says, is a rider who builds victories brick by brick, assembling laps with surgical repeatability when the Desmosedici stays inside a precise performance window. Marc Márquez lives elsewhere, in the margins where instability becomes opportunity. In Bagnaia's thoughts, a quiet calculation repeats itself: give me balance, and I will give you perfection. Stoner does not criticize that logic. He respects it deeply. Pecco is at his best when the bike speaks clearly and consistently, Stoner says, choosing his words carefully. The little-known technical reality is that Bagnaia prefers a narrower swing-arm flex tolerance, which sharpens rear-end predictability but reduces forgiveness when grip falls away. That choice rewards refinement, not improvisation. Márquez, by contrast, thrives when the Desmosedici moves beneath him, when the front chatters and the rear slides just beyond comfort. His inner voice is different. If it moves, I can work with it. Journalistically, Ducati's preference mirrors the modern championship landscape, where sprint races, evolving aero loads, and compressed weekends punish rigidity. Adaptation has become the dominant currency. Intimately, Stoner senses the injustice Bagnaia might feel, because mastery through precision once defined greatness. Bagnaia leads like a conductor, demanding every instrument stay perfectly in tune. Márquez leads like a jazz musician, reshaping the melody when a note bends. Ducati's engineers, under relentless pressure, lean toward the rider who turns instability into reassurance. That choice is not a rejection of Bagnaia's qualities, but acknowledgement of the climate they now race in. Stoner frames it as evolution, not replacement. Precision still wins races, but adaptation wins uncertainty. The tension builds because refinement suddenly feels old-fashioned in a sport accelerating toward chaos. Bagnaia stands firm, trusting method over instinct. Ducati listens, but follows momentum. The climax arrives quietly, without accusation or applause. In MotoGP 2025, the rider who survives the mess often leads the story, and today that truth cuts deeper than lap times. Casey Stoner is unequivocal when the conversation turns to the Desmosedici itself, because myths can grow faster than lap records in MotoGP. He insists that Francesco Bagnaia does not doubt the bike's strength, only the way its limits reveal themselves under pressure. In the quiet of the garage, Bagnaia's inner voice is clear: this bike can win anywhere, but today it didn't speak to me. Stoner recognizes that thought instantly, having lived it years earlier in the same red colors. Pecco knows this is one of the best bikes Ducati has ever built, Stoner says, his tone firm, almost protective. The friction begins not with performance, but with perception. Ducati wants the world to see unwavering confidence in the Desmosedici, a machine engineered to project dominance, even when results fluctuate. A little-known technical detail complicates that demand. The 2025 Desmosedici uses an aggressively optimized mass damper layout that stabilizes acceleration, but exaggerates rider feedback when front-load balance shifts. That sensitivity invites commentary from riders who feel every nuance. Bagnaia's honesty, then, is not criticism of weakness but acknowledgement of complexity. Journalistically, this matters because factories race narratives as much as rivals. Intimately, it hurts because truth spoken aloud can sound like doubt when echoed through headlines. Bagnaia is not distancing himself from the bike. He is leaning into it, listening closely. His relationship with the Desmosedici resembles a craftsman examining fine marble, pointing out veins not to reject the stone but to carve it better. Ducati, however, hears the chisel striking and worries about cracks others might imagine. Stoner bridges that gap by reminding that champions often articulate discomfort precisely because they believe in the foundation. Silence would be more dangerous. The tension escalates as honesty collides with image management. Bagnaia wonders if restraint would protect the project better than truth. Ducati wonders if truth needs softer edges. Stoner stands between them, translating intention into context. The climax arrives without shouting or blame. In the end, the Desmosedici remains formidable. Bagnaia remains aware of it, and the real challenge lies in aligning confidence with candor before doubt learns to speak louder than speed. Casey Stoner pauses when he recalls Austin, because moments of failure often reveal more than victories ever could. Marc Márquez's crash there did not fracture Ducati's confidence. It reinforced it. In the aftermath, Márquez did not circle the Desmosedici with suspicion. He circled himself. Inside his helmet, the thought was blunt and final. That one was mine. Stoner understands why that mattered so deeply to Ducati's management, a group conditioned to read tone as much as telemetry. Marc never pushed the responsibility outward, and factories remember that, Stoner says quietly. The little-known technical backdrop is that the Austin crash occurred with a front-load configuration that Márquez himself requested, slightly reducing trail to improve turn-in, a risky choice that amplifies rider accountability. By owning the consequence, Márquez protected the bike's narrative. Journalistically, this behavior aligns perfectly with Ducati's obsession with collective belief, where doubt is treated like a contaminant. Intimately, Stoner is careful to draw a line, because he knows this is not a moral hierarchy. Bagnaia, he insists, is no less responsible as a rider. The difference lies in expression, not ethics. Márquez absorbs blame like a sponge absorbs a spill, keeping the surface clean even when the floor is wet. Ducati values that containment because confidence travels faster than explanations. The engineers return to work reassured. The mechanics feel defended. The project breathes easier. Bagnaia, by contrast, tends to externalize the problem to understand it, not to evade it. His inner dialogue is analytical. Why did the grip disappear here and not there? Neither approach is superior in isolation. But Ducati, in this phase, craves reassurance more than interrogation. Stoner defends Bagnaia by refusing to turn contrast into condemnation. He knows belief is fragile inside a factory chasing perfection. The tension peaks because trust is earned not only by speed, but by how failure is framed. Márquez frames it inward, and Ducati leans closer. The story closes on a truth that echoes beyond Austin. In MotoGP, the rider who shields the machine often becomes the machine's voice. Casey Stoner senses the shift long before it becomes visible on timing screens, because factories change shape quietly before they change results. Ducati, he observes, is no longer organizing itself around the status of a defending champion, but around the gravity of a leader who bends systems toward him. Marc Márquez is not just winning races, he is reorganizing priorities. In Bagnaia's private reflections, a sharp thought surfaces. When did leadership stop being about results and start being about atmosphere? Stoner does not frame this as betrayal, but as evolution. Ducati isn't chasing riders anymore, it's chasing cohesion, he says, weighing every word. The little-known technical signal of this shift appears in development meetings, where Márquez's feedback now directly shapes aerobalance simulations before on-track validation, a privilege once reserved for long-term project anchors. Journalistically, that detail speaks volumes. Development time follows influence, and influence follows perceived stability. Márquez amplifies the project by compressing doubt and expanding confidence, especially when results wobble. Bagnaia, meanwhile, questions to refine, not to destabilize, but questioning changes the room's temperature. Inside his helmet, the tension sharpens. Am I leading the bike, or is the bike leading me? Stoner defends Bagnaia's intent while acknowledging Ducati's appetite for certainty. The project now rewards the rider who makes complexity feel lighter. Márquez does that instinctively, even when the bike resists him. Bagnaia does it methodically, demanding clarity before comfort. Ducati's hierarchy tilts toward the former because pressure shortens patience. The factory's emotional capital flows toward reassurance, not explanation. Stoner has lived this moment himself, when trust became alignment and alignment became power. The paddock feels it, even if no one names it aloud. Leadership, in this context, is not about control, but about resonance. Márquez resonates with the machine, the engineers, the rhythm of crisis. Bagnaia hears the shift and recalibrates his silence. The climax settles without noise or rupture. Ducati's project has changed its center of gravity, and once that happens, everything else begins to orbit. Casey Stoner chooses his final words carefully, because endings define legacies more than beginnings. He knows that preference, when misread, can sound like exile. Ducati's lean toward Marc Márquez, he clarifies, is not a verdict on Francesco Bagnaia's worth, but a response to momentum that has its own physics. In Bagnaia's quiet moments, a steady resolve answers the noise. I have won here before, and I can do it again. Stoner hears that confidence and refuses to let it be erased. Preference doesn't cancel belief, it just follows the present, he says, grounding the debate in reality. The little-known technical layer is that Ducati's current development cycle prioritizes rapid setup convergence across sprint and race distances, a process Márquez accelerates by accepting wider setup tolerances without losing pace. That efficiency matters when time compresses. Journalistically, Ducati is behaving like a data-driven organism, reacting to trends rather than sentiments. Intimately, Stoner knows how painful it feels when trust seems conditional. Bagnaia remains a rider capable of building championships through structure and repetition. His method is patient, like shaping clay on a wheel that demands steadiness. Márquez's mindset, however, fits the current tempo, absorbing uncertainty and returning speed immediately. Ducati is not choosing a future forever, but present that feels controllable. Bagnaia senses the pause, not as rejection, but as a moment to recalibrate tone without surrendering identity. Stoner defends that space, insisting that champions do not vanish when the spotlight shifts. Momentum is a tide, not a judgment. Ducati rides it because factories survive by moving, not by remembering. The tension softens into understanding as the paddock listens more closely. Bagnaia's value remains etched in results, not opinions. Márquez's value is amplified by timing. Stoner bridges both truths without favor or nostalgia. The story reaches its peak not in conflict, but in clarity. Preference is temporary, faith is deeper, and greatness waits for no one. In MotoGP 2025, the factory follows the now, but history still keeps the door open.